The crossroads of fantasy, denial, and retail reality at the mall. The making of Mall of Maladaptive Dreaming. Finding performance at the mall. This project began in 2018 when a friend who works in theater, but at that time was supplementing her income working as an assistant manager of a bikini store in a mall, asked me to help her stage a story. We wanted to stage the experience of working in a mall, especially the way she found to essentially daydream through most of her shifts. This led to some research on altered states of consciousness that we could identify in the retail landscape. We honed in on maladaptive dreaming because it was the best way to describe what this person did to make it through a tedious shift at work. Soon, for the rest of us working on this project, maladaptive dreaming became a resonant metaphor for all kinds of experiences in the mall. And in a sense, we all became daydreamers in a maladaptive way. Briefly, maladaptive dreaming describes a condition where a person regularly experiences daydreams that are intense and highly distracting. So distracting, in fact, that the person may stop engaging with whatever they're doing or with the people around them. These daydreams may be triggered by real-life events or stimuli, such as noise, a smell, conversation topic, movie, something on social media, or even a global pandemic. Maladaptive dreamers may dissociate from reality to absorb themselves completely in their daydream and may unknowingly act out the behavior or speak dialogue for characters in their daydream. The content of the daydream is often richly detailed and fantastical. So the site where we had planned to stage our performance, Shops at Uptown Waterloo, which is a well-appointed but mostly vacant mall in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, became the perfect place for our performative examination of maladaptive dreaming. At the core of both maladaptive dreaming and retail is fantasy. Most retail in the 21st century, especially now that almost all of it is online, exists because people have the capacity to fantasize. Psychoanalysts in the tradition of Jacques Lacan have been examining this form of fantasy for years. Fantasy designates our impossible relationship to the person or thing that we most desire. Fantasy is usually conceived as a scenario wherein a person's desire is realized, and the basic definition is adequate so long as we take it literally. That is, what fantasy stages is not a scene in which desire is fulfilled or fully satisfied, but on the contrary, a scene that realizes, that stages desire as such. An important insight of psychoanalysis is that desire is not something given in advance, but something that has to be constructed. And it is precisely the role of fantasy to give the coordinates of a person's desire, to specify its object, to locate the position the person assumes in it. It is only through fantasy that a person is constituted as desiring. In other words, according to Lacanian scholar Slavoj Žižek, through fantasy we learn how to desire. I think essentially the same can be said for the creation of theater and the act of shopping.
Development of the WOOMcollaborative. The WOOMcollaborative had its origins with Mall of Maladaptive Dreaming and another project during the COVID-19 pandemic, lockdowns throughout Canada in early 2020. We thought, who knows if the world will survive the virus, so why not create a multidisciplinary arts incubator with a keen interest in experimental and devised work that challenges traditional concepts of place, as well as an interest in mentoring the next generation of performance creators. Andy, myself, and Joanna are the co-founders of the WOOMcollaborative. All of us thought Mall of Maladaptive Dreaming as an opportunity to bring together local students, practitioners, mannequins, and of course, retail therapists to explore the unique space in which we all formed unique relationships. Collaboration is a key aspect of our work as we see meaning making as an act that inherently involves co-creation. In this sense, the WOOMcollaborative is founded at the crossroads inherent in the human experience. We see the tensions between conflicting and coexisting perspectives, backgrounds, and experiences as a way of delving into the metaphorical wounds that, according to director and artist researcher Eugenio Barba, evocative art is made from.
Impact of COVID and why we chose our location. Mall of Maladaptive Dreaming was originally supposed to be developed and completed from March to September of 2020. However, the COVID-19 pandemic caused delays that prevented us from having final performances until June 2022. It was during this time of lockdown and gradual reopening that we were given the opportunity to truly explore Crossroads within the devising process itself. It is also within this complicated time in human history that we were made to grapple with the complicated history of the space we worked within. As we stated in our land acknowledgement for this production, we know this land as the shops at Uptown Waterloo, but its far-reaching history is, in actuality, far more complicated than that. The land we address with the colonialist name of Waterloo is the traditional territory of many indigenous peoples, including the Anishinaabe, Ottawandaron, and Haudenosaunee. After the Haudenosaunee, often referred to as the Iroquois, allied with the British during the American Revolution, the Haldimand Proclamation granted the Haldimand Tract, which includes 10 kilometers on each side of the Grand River, to them as compensation for their wartime participation. In 1796, businessman Richard Beasley eventually purchased a huge portion of this land from Mohawk leader Richard Brant. Beasley subsequently sold portions to settlers, especially Mennonites from Pennsylvania. In 1908, Abraham Erb, one of these Mennonite settlers, purchased the land that today we call Waterloo.
The crossroads of site-responsive performance and spatial anthropology. Spatial anthropology is defined by UK researcher Les Roberts as the placing of oneself critically and reflexively within the space of contemporary landscapes, urban or otherwise, replete with the meanings and the memories that are the accumulation of human activities. Roberts is quick to point out that spatial anthropology is not merely analogous to something we might alternatively call the anthropology of space. Rather, the orientation is much more performative in scope. In spatial anthropology, there's an effort to deeply understand the cultural context of the space while placing the actions of oneself within this understanding. This spatial intentionality of analysis propels self and body into what phenomenologist Maurice Merleau-Ponty evocatively describes as the flesh of the world. Mall of Maladaptive Dreaming delves into the flesh of the world through a site-responsive animation of our chosen retail space. Dramaturgically speaking, site-responsive performances are animations based on a site as a resource. The performance is conceived for, mounted within, and conditioned by particular qualities of the site. Animation may illuminate what is found in the discursive dimensions of the site, such as its historical, architectural, or cultural reality. But insofar as it strives for a fulsome animation of what a site means to people, this approach also draws on the fabrication of memory, myth, dream, and other less discursive qualities. So what happens when an abandoned store becomes an object of representation for performance? It seems to me that two realities evolve. The first is based on the site's substantial, matter-of-fact existence. The Shops at Uptown Waterloo is a city center mall that has been renovated within the last 10 years to look like a place of aspiring wealth and consumer well-being. My collaborators and I spent a good deal of time and energy thinking about what we found in the mall and in our recently abandoned store. The found tells us about the place and its inhabitants. The second reality has to do with our gaze. This view is puzzled by our desires and anxieties. Indeed, this second reality is posited by our feelings and experiences of the place, by the aura of its objects. Walter Benjamin has said that to perceive the aura of an object is to invest it with the ability to look at us in return. Although it may seem like a pure illusion, the way we perceive the aura of our surroundings is capable of triggering a whole chain of consequences that will affect the way we see the world forever. Mall of Maladaptive Dreaming is essentially the dramatized result of our collaborative perceptions of the aura of the shops at Uptown Waterloo, and specifically the place of retail we occupied within. For example, even in the early stages of development, we were drawn to the fact that the shops at Uptown Waterloo and its precursors were built over Laurel Creek, a waterway which runs through a good portion of the city of Waterloo and is part of the largest wetland complex in southern Ontario. The Berry Creek remained a strong presence in the writing and overall devising process. The imagery of how its natural existence was essentially repressed by civil engineering occupied our collective imagination as we tried to animate the pronounced juxtaposition between how the mall presents itself atop the denial of natural history hidden within concrete aqueducts beneath the mall's tiled floors.
Specifically, as malls do, the shops at Uptown Waterloo presents as a very cultivated place. Bright fluorescent lights, white walls, and trees in precisely located containers. Developers built the first mall on the site in the 1960s in the vein of colonizers draining water away from where it naturally exists to build settlements. The more we explored the mall, however, the more we noticed that the mall's facade of control was deteriorating. The shops offering people food, prescription drugs, vacations, lingerie, and jewelry were struggling or being forced to close. A space constructed for the smooth, unproblematic consumption of goods began to appear empty as the facade of purchasing a better you faded during the pandemic lockdowns. And as the world reopened, the entire enterprise felt vacant and misplaced. As we all sat with this feeling of no longer fitting into a space that was designed and built for us on the land that we, as colonizers, stole, we sensed that this tension was representative of a larger crossroads that humankind faces. Will we as a species embrace the creek, untamable and potentially dangerous as it may be, or will we continue to deny its presence and continue to build over it? To further ponder this question, we decided to view the act of dramaturgical analysis not simply as done through traditional research methods, but also through action. When exploring how to portray the creek and the denied reality of running water through multimedia installations and sound maps, we developed a secondary motif of an enigmatic, dead or missing woman within the creek. This woman became a scenographic icon who raised several provocative questions. What are the consequences of living in a world of consumerist facades? Who benefits from living in this world and who suffers? Who is voiceless, and how do the voiceless find ways of speaking? And, of course, how much longer will we continue to have a choice to separate these two worlds before the crossroads collide and we're forced to face these questions head on? We also picked this location because the former tenant of the retail space where the majority of this production took place was Sachet Vu, a women's clothing store that served predominantly plus-size drag queens. Because they left a lot of material, such as mannequins, behind when they closed, we wanted to honor the aura of the shops itself. Sachet Vu served as an important reminder that to us, the crossroads in the shops at Uptown Waterloo are not simply a good versus bad duality. Many of the shops are independent businesses just trying to get by. Rather than ignore this complex landscape, we chose to embrace it. Mall of Maladaptive Dreaming is set within a mall club, which is a new type of exotic dancing club located within the mall for customers to, for a small fee, easily satisfy their sexual desires while picking up groceries on the way home. As the performance evolves, these exotic dancers are gradually replaced by mannequins who perform the same function, client satisfaction, for a fraction of the cost of human labor. While this seems dystopian, companies have already started to embrace changes such as these, starting with self-checkouts, robot waiters, and numerous other AI applications. Moreover, since 2020, the Waterloo region, not unlike many jurisdictions, has experienced astronomical increases in the price of living. And as such, we've witnessed in real time many local businesses adopting technological ways to reduce human labor in order to survive.
Finally, we want to touch on an important crossroads in Mall of Maladaptive Dreaming, where dramaturgy and psychoanalysis meet. Perhaps our attraction to shopping is the way that it fuels desire, and whether or not this is a good thing has a lot to do with how desire is staged, and thus how it is learned. According to Jacques Lacan, the root cause of desire is the object petit a, the chimerical focus of fantasy, the object or person that attracts our desire at the same time, and this is its paradox, is posed retroactively by this desire. If this fantasy attraction threatens to disrupt the rational order of our life, the balance between the realm of fantasy and the realm of reality, then psychoanalytic theory advises that we live the fantasy to its fullest in order to realize that the power the object or persona of our desire has over us is in fact a void. That is, it becomes a void once the staging is disrupted. And from this different perspective, we can see how the psychic energy of our investment works. In Mall of Maladaptive Dreaming, in addition to creatively responding to a retail space, we essentially collaborated with mannequins. Originally called GABA Girls after their creator, Lester Gaba, these beings of our retail space have gradually assumed an increasing presence in our creative work. Indeed, in spending about 2 years with these peculiar representations of women, we wondered what happens when a GABA girl becomes a sort of object of desire in a retail context. Lacan's definition of an object of desire states that as soon as a person, or in this case a thing, becomes elevated by our desire, it starts to function as a kind of screen, an empty space on which we project our fantasies. Here the GABA girl is a sort of void filled out by fantasy. But when we wondered what happens when the staging of the void of fantasy involves real people, the writer of the project, Joanna Cleary, made a decision to conceive a retail experience where women and GABA girls are essentially interchangeable, and as such work together in the staging of desire for the gaze of mostly men. In this development, I think the staging of a kind of erotic desire within the intimacy of our retail space becomes a strange spectacle. Lacan identifies this as a shift from desire to drive in our relationship to the coveted thing. The GABA girl becomes the fantasy screen of some unattainable value. Let's call it the perfect female form that sets our desire in motion. While the intimate interactions between these GABA girls and our performers exemplifies more the embodiment of a problematic enjoyment, that is, the relationship between a woman and a thing of retail around which a perverse drive circulates. The transformation from staging of desire to that of drive consists precisely in the fact that desire is by definition caught in a certain dialectic. It can always turn into its opposite or slide from one object to another. The drive, on the other hand, is inert. It resists being meshed in a dialectical movement. It circulates around its object, fixed upon the point around which it pulsates.
Audience engagement in the Mall Club and online. The WOOMcollaborative, co-founded by us, is a Waterloo Region multidisciplinary arts incubator serving as a research and development hub for the Kitchener-Waterloo cultural sector by providing space, subsidy, and mentorship to emerging artists. Our mandate of WOOMcollaborative is to support artists who wish to develop works of an experimental or alternative nature that challenge the definitions of theatrical performance by embracing music, dance, visual art, and new media. The initial collaboration and ideas around retail therapy, which resulted in Mall of Maladaptive Dreaming, came about shortly after the creation and digital materialization of WOOMcollaborative itself, the timing of which were both challenged by the COVID-19 pandemic. The support of collaborative projects that WOOM fosters include the inevitable demands of engagement on social platforms. In a world that has experienced varying degrees of social distancing since March 11th of 2020, the need for online representation increased. It was clear to us during the development stage of this project that, similar to small businesses just starting out during the pandemic, we had to heavily market this work. We ensured that our online audience felt like they were part of our developmental journey from the start through narration, images, and videos posted, which put respective spotlights on playwright Joanna Cleary and her writing process, The performers and their take on devised performance, Andy Houston and his approach in directing the created world of the Mall Club, and designers Gary Kirkham and Chelsea Van Overbeek with their take on video and lighting. We've branded a poster, digital program, trailer, and a campaign revealing elements of the project in line with a countdown of opening night. We welcomed all questions and put out reminders of the limited seating due to the size of the space, which was quite small compared to seating arrangements in a conventional theater, and the requirement of masks and social distancing in close proximity with the performers while they animated the store. This made shoulder-to-shoulder seating unattainable. All of the performances essentially, thus, had a full house due to these intimate yet distant conditions. Overall, our aim was to apply our dramaturgical understanding of the work through these digital platforms to provide an enriching experience to our audience before they stepped foot into the shops at Uptown Waterloo with us. We drew the audience into our performance space through Instagram and Facebook, like a GABA girl draws a customer into a store. We welcomed the audience away from scrolling online to witness as reality and fantasy intermingled through live performance and mannequins in an abandoned store in a dying mall. The outcome of these performances felt like a dream we turned into a reality collaboratively with the audience. The crossroads of this project are many. To this day, maladaptive dreaming still lacks support in a treatment protocol or representation. It does not have a category in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is also otherwise known as the DSM-5. But there still is an increasing awareness and need for it, and even a budding community of maladaptive daydreamers online through forums like Reddit. Retail therapy still strikes the hearts of many in a society that is funneled by algorithms to propagate consumerist mentalities of keeping up with the Joneses through social platforms. Lester Gaba's success in the development of the GABA girl in the 1930s that veered away from previously lifeless wax or papier-mâché representation of a woman continues. The GABA girl remains to be an ever-fashionable plaster woman, daintily animated and completely unattainable to all who gaze at her. Walking through malls to this day, we are reminded of the continued unrealistic representation of the female body through every GABA girl that is made to pose in a shop window. Where the road of fantasy and the road of reality meet is where creativity emerges, a crossroad from where we all may feel a swell of inspiration and a call to action.
Thank you for your time and attention.
See you at the mall.